Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Oh, I never put on headphones with a little top knot on my head, and I wasn't sure if it went in front or back. I think I'm all here. Hello there. It's not a man bun. If it were on a man, it would be a man bun.
That's right.
It's a lady bun. Okay. Hi, guys. I don't even know. Oh, God. Oh, please stop it. I have started every show, I think, since November with I don't know where to start because we're so inundated. And every time I say inundated now, it feels like a bad pun on, what's happening at the moment in Texas. You know what? I'm going to start, first of all, saying hello. It's the 30th of August. Goodbye, summer of 2017. And Charlie Deach, the editor of Pittsburgh City Paper, is here. And Charlie, let's just get this out of the way right at the top. So I told you, and I got good reaction from it actually yesterday, that we'd be staying here.
Yeah.
That
was
that was yesterday.
Yeah,
you expect me to? I mean, come on. If my my audience is smart,
they are.
And I think they've caught on actually to the fact that we are I don't know, nomadic.
Yes.
Mobile.
Making it up as we go along.
There, what he said. So this wonderful plan we had to stay here was dependent on one particular young man who
can no longer
perform
do the show
that
here.
function.
Yes.
He's juggling like so many young people do now, 2-3 different jobs, and he thought he could. Anyway, it's not happening. So back to plan. What was A?
This was Plan A.
This was always Plan A.
This was.
And don't worry, I'm not going away. I'm going to stick with you now through this transition. And now we can finally announce the, we can?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah, right. And I'll just have one my fingers crossed behind my back.
I have written confirmation.
Okay, written, you do. We have written confirmation.
Yes.
That we will, this show will be coming to you from what's left of Richard Mellon's Scapes. I mean, it just blows my mind.
See, we've been so busy with the logistics that part of it has sort of like left my mind for a while.
Not mine.
Well, now it's right now. So we are going to partner with the Lynn Cullen Show. Hold on to your hats. Will be brought to you in partnership with Trib Live Radio.
Which is what's left of Richard Mellon Scapes.
Yeah.
A big fan of mine.
Right. Mine too.
Yeah. Richard Mellon Scapes Tribune Review.
Yeah, they so they got rid of the print issue and they've had the online edition, but beside that, even when they had the print edition, they started this venture called Trib Live Radio, and it's part of the Trib, but it's also very much its own entity.
Yes, it is its own entity.
They've had various folks, working there. Some names you recognize: Tim Benz, Mike Wasaki, our sports columnists. Some people have done some shows there, and they're ramping back up in a new studio. So the reason this took a left turn, of course,
it took the left turn is because we had intended to be doing this from Trib Live was it almost last month?
Oh, it was maybe even earlier than that.
But as soon as we had decided, yes, we're doing this, then Trib Live decided to.
They moved locations.
Physically moved their location. And so we've been waiting for them to get settled and to have their studio in place. So
during the interim, we looked for other possibilities because you liked staying here. I know
I liked being here, but it's not going to happen.
And so literally that was the plan until 3:30 yesterday afternoon. And then I got back on the phone with Josh King and the folks at Trib Live, who who honestly who've wanted to partner with us from the beginning, and we like the idea. They come with a built-in network. They come with because really, when it comes to online with online radio production, podcasting, and so forth, they've been doing it a while now, and they've really got their stuff together.
They got the equipment.
Yes.
Okay.
They can take phone calls for us. I also have that in a written confirmation. They'll be able to take phone calls.
Okay, but the only other the problem is now is they're still setting the studio up. Right. So it's looking like I'll be broadcasting from here. That means without phone calls until, at least for a week and a half.
Yeah,
is that right?
We'll launch from the new studio on September 13th.
September 13th. Lucky 13. I think that's a Wednesday.
I'm getting a message from the guy. We're still good.
Oh!
I did get one, but he just said.
What did he say?
He just said, I told him that you'll be setting up time to come
okay.
Check out the new studio. And he just wrote, but every time I see a message from somebody involved with this project,
your blood runs cold. I know. So guys, that's what it is. And the union of Lynn Cullen with a Richard Mellon-Scaife property is too delicious for words. Yeah. Do you know a friend of mine was once his personal secretary?
Really?
And she ain't no conservative. She had a job.
Right.
And so she would tell me little things every once in a while, right. But he was a nice guy to her and very generous. That's all I want to say.
I was gearing up too, but let's start this with the clean coming together.
Yes.
Not really clean, but
and
I want to stress that we will not be changing one bit our content, No. As you well know, but I just wanted the listeners to know that this is coming with no compromise. I mean, they're taking us
as we are,
liberal warts and all.
Yeah. So that's that. That's what's happening. Oh, dear. Well, and I'll believe it when I see it at this point. I have become such a total skeptic. Don't believe it until it actually happens. But, I came in here today. I just found this out 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, not even probably. Yep.
Yeah, so my head's still spinning.
I always like to let you have the rest of the day. I found out late yesterday. I thought, I'm going to let Lynn have a good night's sleep, and then I'll tell her first thing in the morning before she goes on the air.
It's okay. So that's the latest. Oh, dear. The difference in... look at these two headlines. Wall Street Journal. Trump's reassuring hurricane response. Are you kidding me? I read this and I was thinking, what? The lead here. President Trump visited Texas Tuesday to assess the damage from Hurricane Harvey and show concern for its victims. So far, his administration is largely getting praise for effective handling of the crisis. Have I missed something? Now, I will say this. As far as I know, I don't know. It seems like FEMA is doing, I guess, as well as can be expected under historic circumstances. And it's not surprising that FEMA has gotten its act together a little bit since Katrina. And then this Wall Street Journal article actually says this: Trump's tweets about the storm have been informative and responsible, with a tone appropriate to the human tragedy. we've said many times, ad nauseum, in fact, that, America is divided and we're living in separate universes. But if anyone could say that Trump's tweets during the hurricane have been proper in tone and informative, what? I mean, what? Here's the other headline. As the waters swell, so does Trump's ego. I am of the same mind as this piece because I've been watching the tweets. I watched as much as I could stomach some of his dealings in Texas yesterday. And as is so often the case with this president, I cringed. I mean, I was in an incredible cringe. I once took a relaxation course, and one of the ways they told you could know if your muscles were relaxed is first tighten them. I mean, like, tighten as much as you can, and then let go. So you have the contrast, so you see the difference. And I was thinking that, with Trump, I'm often experiencing an incredible contraction of my muscles. It's part of the stress. Oh. Frank Bruni, he's been doing some good work lately. Frank Bruni nails it. He says what Trump saw in Hurricane Harvey was a mirror of his own majesty. And that's what I was saying, I think, yesterday, that the tweets are mind-blowing. It's like he's bragging about this storm is the biggest! Exclamation point. One of his tweets, while people were literally watching everything they had disappear, including their lives in some cases, his one tweet said, "Wow!" Exclamation point. Really? That's presidential? And bragging about the size? And so Bruni starts looking at some of these tweets that the Wall Street Journal tells us were comforting, informative, and proper in tone. Even experts have said they've never seen one like this! Exclamation point! It's like they saved the big one for me because I do big. I do big. Everything I touch is the best. It's bigly. Historic rainfall, unprecedented flooding. And Bruni says all of this framed him not as a leader sweating the fate of his people, but as a spectator watching nature's angriest reality show ever. Yep. Wow. And also, let us recall that in the middle, some of his tweets were about his numbers in the election in Missouri, trying to sell a book by the murderous sheriff of Milwaukee County. Incredible. Thousands of people losing their livelihoods, their homes, their lives in many cases. And he's doing what the only thing he knows how to do is measuring his audience the size of his storm as related to any other. It figures that the unprecedented, historic storm of the millennium happened when I was here. It's befitting me. So, I mean, that is what we're seeing here. Trump sees in this hurricane an opportunity for attention and a mirror of his own majesty. Historic! When he was in Texas yesterday, every 2 words out of his mouth were epic, historic, biggest, historic, epic. No one's ever seen. Epic, historic. If you follow the coverage and watched what he said to each person, that's what he said to each person, the same thing. Bruni nails it again. The weather around Trump changes. The weather inside him doesn't. That's it. That's it. And Bruni harkens back to, I think it was Thursday, right? Friday. When he was meeting with the poor president of Finland, who, by the way, when he was meeting with the president of Finland, Trump announced that Finland would be purchasing a whole bunch of military fighter jets from Boeing. And because we make the best stuff, the biggest bigly death machines, and the Finland's going to be buying a bunch of that. Jobs, 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 American workers, see, I'm working out for them. And the Finnish president sort of gave him a look when he said it. We found out later why he gave him a look. He's not buying anything. There's Trump with another president right there, and not. So the Finnish president, I guess the day after, said, caused a big stir back in Finland. We're what? We're buying what? Fighter? Who? He says, no, consider the source, right? That was Donald Trump. Anyway, did I mention to you yesterday with the Finnish president thing? He also said something about, trying to say that Russia wasn't so terrible. He actually said with the Finnish president there something like, Finland's right next. Yeah, you guys are right next. You're neighbors. You've gotten along for hundreds of years. Hello? Hello? The Finns have lived in terror for hundreds of years. Oh, jeez. Invaded once or twice, who knows? I'm not a great expert in Finland's history myself, but here's something else he said when the Finnish president is there. He said, yeah, I remember I visited Finland once back in the 90s. And then he said this, I was famous in the 90s too. Oh dear. Cringe. Now, when I talk about Trump, I know your muscles are tightening, so just when I pause for a moment, just let them go. Be aware, and then let them go. So in case you missed it, Rooney writes, and then when he left the Corpus Christi firehouse, he noticed that about 1,000 people had gathered outside, and he heard some cheering. What a crowd! He boomed. What a turnout! All the water in the world couldn't drown his satisfaction. Frank Bruni, New York Times. He's got him nailed. As opposed to the Wall Street Journal. Trump's reassuring hurricane response. Oh my. And people are getting on Melania because she wore 6-inch stiletto heels. But let's be honest. She wore the heels just from the White House to the plane. Helicopter that took him to the plane. I don't know. And there was a servant carrying 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases. This is for a day trip to a flood. And so when she got off the plane, she was wearing blindingly white sneakers that I'm sure she'd never worn before, and a hat, lest you not know who she was, that said FLOTUS on it. And Trump, I told you about his watch his hats. So he was wearing, as I said he would, he was wearing his new product. It's not, he's, Make America Great Again hats. Oh, so out of fashion. If you're a Trump, you're a fashion innovator. You keep pushing the envelope. So if you don't have the latest Trump hat, you're not keeping up. So he's been modeling the latest Trump product, and it is a hat, a baseball cap, of course, that says USA on it. Comes in a few colors, I believe white, red, and maybe blue. And what I didn't know until today, because I was a little shocked it didn't say anything about him, on the back of the hat, a tasteful Trump is on the back. It's so unlike him not to put himself front and center. I mean, how incredibly modest of him. And then on the sides, 45. And he is selling the new caps, USA Trump 45, for $40 on his online store run by his re-election campaign. Okay. Oh no, the baby elephant died. I didn't know that. It didn't look like it was gonna. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the one of the elephants at the Pittsburgh Zoo gave birth prematurely to a little calf, and then abandoned it. Would not care for it, and so this animal was taken over by human handlers who worked mightily to give it a chance, keep it alive, and it's died. That's sad. Okay. But in the scope of things, guys, let's keep the scope of things. Susan writes, it's a great thing that Harvey happened in Texas so Trump can play to his base. He can bless them with his presence, wave their flag, wear his USA hat, and look as concerned as he is capable of looking, using it for his own popularity as much as possible. I don't know. Susan writes, also, I've been drinking so much wine since he became president. I actually broke my corkscrew last night. I can relate to this, Susan. I too have noticed an uptick in my consumption, not only of wine, but also of food. I've been gaining weight. I want to kill this guy. Yeah, because he's just making... I wish I was one of those people when I get anxious, when I get all cringed up, that I'm incapable of eating. And I have the exact opposite reaction. When I get anxious, food! Give me food! I'm one of those people comforted by food. God. No, okay. I don't have time for that right now. So one of the scarier pictures I've seen of what's going on in Texas are these islands of fire ants. Have you seen those pictures? Oh my God. Now, I'm aware that fire ants do this because of some terrifying short story or something that I had heard on the radio about a plantation. I don't know why I would have heard this. A plantation somewhere in South America. I mean, it was a drama, but audio. And there were fire ants approaching. And they were destroying everything and everybody in their path. And I guess the plantation owner, if I'm remembering correctly, decides he's going to simply flood his entire land. He's just going to flood it to wipe them out. And so he floods his own plantation, and they're celebrating the fact that they've destroyed the fire ants, when all of a sudden they too see these islands of fire ants now floating toward them. And that's where I found out that fire ants have a way of surviving floods. And here we're seeing it. I mean, this is the insect world so often blows you away by how it functions, how the individuals give themselves up for the greater good, right? In times of stress and danger. So what fire ants do is they jump on the back of a dead fire ant floating, and then as each living fire ant secures essentially a fire ant underneath to float on that fire ant, they develop a structure which they make out of the bodies of their dead, drowned brethren, and then they all hang on to each other. They form these huge, I mean, they look like these massive, sort of moving, frightening-looking pools of fire ants. So a lot of people in Texas are seeing these things, and they're seeing huge ones. There was a picture in one paper, I think it was a British paper, that I could not believe it. It looked like, it looked like the end of the world. And so these guys are just going to hang on for dear life till they get to dry land. Then they're coming in. There are alligators. There are snakes. There is so much horror there. But the flotillas of fire ants. And by the way, fire ants are relatively new to North America. They did, in fact, they were brought in somehow from South America, which is where that story I had heard came from. Oh my God, Milt. That is the story. How do you always know this? It's called Lynagin versus the Ants. Yes. Why would I have heard that on Linegan, the owner of a plantation in the Brazilian rainforest, is warned by the district commissioner that a swarm of ferocious and organized soldier ants are approaching and that he must flee. But he believes in the superiority of the human brain. He convinces his workers to stay and fight with him. So when the ants reach his estate, he seals it by filling a moat that surrounds it on 3 sides, the 4th side being a river. The ants attempt to cross over by covering the waters with tree leaves, but he thwarts them repeatedly by emptying them, flooding the moats. I got to tell you, I remember now listening to this thing. I think I was driving in my car. It was the most terrifying story I've ever heard. I mean, it was just whatever my imagination was conjuring was the equal of anything that some Hollywood producer could come up with. Anyway, eventually the ants breach that line of defense and the men retreat. Then they try to incinerate using gasoline and fire. And of course, the ants eventually breach the last defenses, and all seems lost. However, Linegan realizes that his original principle of canals and damming can be put to use. If he dams the main river itself, oh, that's right, the whole plantation will flood, drowning all the ants. He and his men can take refuge in the heights of the manor house on a hill. But that means someone's got to reach the dam, which is already overrun by the ants. He puts on a makeshift protective suit. He douses himself with gasoline. He picks up 2 spray cans of gas and runs for the dam, runs through the ants. He reaches the dam controls and floods the plantation. This means the death of this year's crop, but it will save his men, preserve the contents of his granaries, and destroy the menace of the ants. The climax of the story occurs on the return journey when he is knocked down by the ants and almost eaten. Thinking about a stag he had seen the ants devour to the bones, he forces himself to get up. Despite suffering horrible injuries, including ant bites to the inside of his nose and directly below his eyes, Linegan continues running, reaches the concrete ditch with the blazing petroleum, and survives. At the story's end, Linegan awakes while recovering from his injuries. The first words are, "I told you I would come back." Okay, so I didn't remember it that way. So in this, he beats him. Well, somewhere in whatever I was listening to, it was that story. And maybe it was on some science thing where then they said, this is bull because those ants, because fire ants, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyway, the fire ants are in. Thank you, Milton. You're always so on top of this stuff. Impressive. Brooke writes, hang on. Someone yesterday said this storm has knocked the Trump investigations off the front pages. It doesn't matter if they're on the front pages. It just matters that Mueller and his investigators are doing their work. And I think it's starting to coalesce. Little bits and pieces here and there, little, people starting to talk, the emails that have surfaced, all that stuff about Hillary's emails. Imagine that, man. We only knew that the emails worth reading were in the other guy's keeping. But Brooke says, I for one grow impatient for the results of these investigations. If you believe Comey, we're now well beyond the 1-year mark for the initial investigations. With so much smoke swirling around Trump, there's got to be a fire. There's no doubt there is. I mean, these guys can't, the investigators literally have to build an airtight case. So I'm sure they've seen enough to know, yeah, there's crimes here. There are crimes here. We have to be able to prove it beyond anybody's doubt. I mean, that isn't so important for the country. I don't suppose you saw that the Jim Baker, who I thought, didn't he go to jail for a long time? Tammy Faye's ex? Jim Baker has said that if Trump is impeached, Christians will take up arms and go to war. It'll launch a new civil war. So there you got Jim Baker now essentially calling for armed insurrection if we follow the rule of law. Trump says, I was hoping the fire ants would get Trump yesterday. Well, oh, that's it. Well, that's it. Wait. So Milton comes up with another one, The Naked Jungle, based on a short story, read by Charlton Heston. That's right. Yeah, it's something like that. Anyway, it was chilling. I mean, it was good stuff. But so here it is, in reality. God. So meanwhile, we were so into ourselves being Americans, because that's what we do. Are you aware that there is flooding that is also unprecedented and deadly as hell happening in Asia right now? No, of course you're not, because who cares? 41 million people affected, okay? Over 1,000 people have died in India, in Bangladesh, I believe some other countries as well, Nepal. Landslides as a result of all this flooding. And United Nations officials say a catastrophe is unfolding in South Asia. The severest flooding in years. 400 people dead in just one section of India. And the rain won't stop. It keeps coming. Bangladesh, 1/3 of that country of 165 million. 1/3 of the country is underwater. But there ain't no such thing as climate change. No. What we are seeing is what was predicted by scientists talking about what climate change would do. It's not just about the weather. It's about the weather's impact on humans. A lot of the migration out of Africa that ends up with these poor people trying desperately to get out and get help, drowning then in the Mediterranean or stuck in refugee camps. That migration is not just because of war. It's often because of famine, because of the change in climate. Drought is really, really forcing huge migrations of people looking for water, looking for food. And while they're doing that, elsewhere in the globe, people are desperately trying to get away from the water. And they too in danger, true danger. I remember, can't have been more than 5, 6, 7 years ago when climate scientists were saying, do you understand that there will be huge migrations of people? This changing weather is going to create the kind of havoc that destabilizes countries, destabilizes institutions, destabilizes political order, social order, all of that. And we're seeing it already. But so many people just refuse to acknowledge what, okay, here it is, it's happening. 1,000-year storm. No, not anymore. What's going on right now in Texas, that's going to be maybe a 5-year storm, 4-year storm. I don't know. They're going to be happening. They're going to be coming. Because the oceans are warming, and warmer oceans mean more moisture. I don't understand why people don't get it. I don't understand. And so climate change, sending people rushing from a stricken Africa up looking for help and shelter and livelihoods in Southern Europe, let's say, or Europe, creating incredible panic among Europeans and moves to the right, to nationalism, to putting up walls. You know? We're seeing it all play out. Here's somebody in Bangladesh saying, we're used to flooding. It is the monsoon season. We're used to flooding. But we've never seen anything like this in our lives. Interesting, huh? Someone in Bangladesh yesterday is saying that, while somebody in Houston, Texas, US of A, is saying the same. And you have to be willfully blind and deaf not to make connections. I read a story today. I'm sorry, this is not uplifting either. I read a story today. It was in the Washington Post. The PG printed a little bit of it as well today. It is an indication, again, of how capitalism, left unfettered, will literally destroy the globe. We talked a little bit yesterday about how the flooding in Houston would never have been this bad if Houston had been forward thinking, if Houston had done what almost any other city in the country has done, which is have zoning regulations. No, as their population grew, they just kept pouring concrete and paving over the natural world. The natural world, which is there for a reason, so that when it rains, the rain has somewhere to go. And it's natural that the rain goes into the ground, that the ground receives it and is capable of receiving it. In that regard, what's happening in Houston right now is largely man-made. And I'm old enough to remember when farmers, did what farmers had done forever. tended their crops. Hard work, man. And there were family farms all over the place, right? It was a wonderful but hard way of life. It's gone. It's gone. Now we have something called agribusiness. Agribusiness. And companies like Monsanto and other chemical companies are now pretty much the drivers of agribusiness. So while our food gets bigger and purtier and less tasty and filled with all kinds of God knows what chemicals we don't know about and don't want to know, we're again destroying something that had worked for a long time for human beings. Farming. Just farming on a small scale. So because agribusiness, which is how we get our food now, agribusiness uses chemicals. And they have created a nightmare scenario, a revolving kind of circular destruction in which they create a chemical that is targeted at killing the vegetation they want to kill so that the stuff they want to grow and sell will grow. And the plants, because nature is resistant to being wiped out. It's what nature's all about. And so weeds become impervious to whatever pesticide is being used. And so you have to up it, get a nastier herbicide. And then the weeds become pretty much can slough off that pesticide. So the newest, baddest pesticide came out just this growing season. And it's called dicamba. And according to this article, dicamba is poised to literally wipe out huge swaths of vegetation, of real plants, of trees, of everything, all over the Midwest and the South. Here's how that works. According to the Post, it says farmers are locked in an arms race between ever stronger weeds and ever stronger weed killers. And we want to thank Monsanto and all the others for creating this kind of farming, chemical farming. It is like a military arms race, and it just keeps growing. So the latest system that the chemical guys have come up with is this dicamba. And get this, because their former, this dicamba is so lethal, by the way. It's to be used on soybean crops. Dicamba is so lethal that it will kill soybeans. So why would soybean growers be using it? Well, they can't use regular soybeans. So the chemists who came up with the killer, dicamba, also came up with a genetically modified dicamba-resistant soybean. So soybean farmers all over bought the deal. Okay, so we're going to get these dicamba-resistant soybeans instead of the ones we've been using forever. And then we're going to get the dicamba. And that's what they did this year, this growing season for the first time. And guess what's happened? Turns out the dicamba does something which is called it volatilizes. Volatilizes. What that means is it re-vaporizes. Once it's on the plants, it actually re-vaporizes and gets into the air and then wafts around to the field next door, which is an old-fashioned kind of farm that didn't buy the dicamba-resistant soybeans. They got the regular soybeans, and that crop's destroyed. The trees along the highways, withering. Other crops, destroyed. And this stuff is particularly toxic to soybeans, the very crop that it was created to protect. But see, in order to protect it, you had to buy their soybean seeds, genetically altered. How insane, are you following this? How insane is this? Here's a agronomy professor. It's really hard to get a handle on how widespread the damage is going to be. I've come to the conclusion that this is not manageable. So your EPA or your I don't know, the government signed off on this crap, and it is in danger of literally creating an agricultural crisis in this country. Here's a Penn State scientist. This should be a wake-up call. It won't be. Because it won't be. Because in business, you let the capitalists do what they want to do, and they destroy stuff because they never think ahead of their, little, spreadsheet. Oh, look at that. We're never. So Houston is a concrete jungle, and now it's what it is. And crops that used to grow just fine, thank you very much, are now withering on the vine. Farmers across the country planted more than 20 million acres of these genetically altered soybeans so they could use dicamba. That's according to Monsanto, who would know because they had to purchase it from them. And so anyone who didn't purchase the right little seeds, their crops are dying. Because it turns out that dicamba doesn't like to just stay where it's supposed to. It gets into the air and blows around. Oh, dear God. Just saying. Pay attention. Pay attention. Dorothea writes, I think your new home at Trib Live could grow the listener base. We do too. But I'm wondering what kind of new listener you'll get. No. That's not a problem because people who listen to podcasts choose what they want to listen to. So if I do a show there, they're not doing any other political shows that we know of.
I don't think so.
No.
It's mostly entertainment-based, sports-based.
It's mostly sports and stuff. But they wanted us, okay? Because they want content and they do want you.
Yeah, they came to us with this proposal.
They came to us, okay? So we're bringing them a potential audience, and it could be that you'll find out that, they got this great sports show, and some of you are sports fans, and I don't know. And even if they were to get me people who are ideologically different than most of us. I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as actually a return, maybe, to what used to be what I did on talk radio before we started like just screaming at each other. A more diverse audience is a better audience. Those kind of callers make you think. In fact, make a better show in many respects, given that this kind of show is as much entertainment as it is information driven. She says, I hope they've offered you a 6-second kill button. I bet they have it, don't you think? Or maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who cares?
Yeah. The only kill button we have here is a... I knocked the board off the table.
Yeah, right. She says, this reminds me a little bit of the 3 or 4 weeks you spent on the air at KDKA. Oh, God. Don't remind me of that nightmare. So after TAE radio went to an all-sports format, I lost my job. Right. And KDKA picked me up to do weekends. I had a weekend show. What a nightmare. What a nightmare that was there. The culture there, the audience, the management at the time. It was mind-blowing. I thought I couldn't even, I didn't think I could survive it. And in fact, then somebody else came and suggested I come over to their little station, which had been playing country western music, and he thought, I'd rather you start us as a talk station. And that was WPTT. And so I went over there, and I remember when I went into the general manager at KDKA to say, I'm leaving, he laughed at me. The arrogance of that crowd is beyond belief. He said, you're leaving us to go to that? A 5,000 watt you got 50,000 watts here, you're going to a 5,000 watt AM? I said, I am. Yes, sirree. Bye. It was tough going there the first bit, because that was a radio station that had an audience that tuned in and wanted to hear country western music. And they got me. So we had to build that audience from scratch. And the first few weeks were hell. I had a 3-hour show and no listeners. And it's then that Susan came on. I called her. I said, Susan, how would you like to talk to me for an hour or two so I can have somebody to talk to? And that's when Susan started. She just rode into my, to my aid, because I had nobody to talk to. It was something. But we built that little thing up, and then Doug Hurst came over. Jerry Boyer came over. We built a little talk station there. God. Yeah, KDKA, I'd rather die.
You'd rather go to the Trib.
I would never. Right. I would never. Somebody said to me, if they offered you a 3-hour radio gig, Monday through Friday, would you I said, I would no more take. I would not. Because, it's a workplace, and I'm a human, and I need to feel comfortable where I am. I also need to be in control. I'll do just fine at Trib Live.
I agree.
And we'll be just fine over there. No problem. So I think we're almost done. So we just got to get through this difficult time where we can't take callers, and that's only going to be another maybe 10 shows or so, if that. Because Monday I ain't here. It's Labor Day. I don't think many people even know that Labor Day is to honor the worker.
Right, no, I agree, yeah.
Do people even know that now?
No, it's the last cookout day to most people.
Yeah, let's honor those workers before we just get them under our thumbs and do you see, today in Missouri is the day when all those poor people who had seen all those minimum wage workers who had seen an increase in St. Louis because St. Louis passed a city ordinance raising their pay, and they enjoyed that for about 7-8 months, and then the Republican legislature there in Missouri, Jefferson City, I believe, they passed a bill saying no city can pass a higher minimum wage than we decide. And so after those poor people, workers in St. Louis, enjoyed not even still a living wage, today they got their first paychecks under the new regime. Wow. Can you imagine? But happy Labor Day.
Have a hot
dog. Okay. I think that's it. We're out of time, as they say. So, guys, thank you very much, and have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.